All right, everybody, good morning to our second speaker of today's 2020 UNCG Virtual Entrepreneur Day. We are lucky enough to have UNCG alum Anna Sullivan joining us. We're going to wait a few minutes to get started. We may have some folks that are coming in a little bit late, so we want to give them a chance. But I did want to let everyone know that this session was being recorded. We will share the recording on our website, which is startup.uncg.edu. And if you click on initiatives, you'll be able to find the Virtual Entrepreneur Day page there. I think we'll also send maybe an email to the attendees with a link to the recording once we have all of those up and ready to go through Eventbrite. Yeah, we'll wait just a couple of minutes here for folks to log on and we'll get things started shortly. All right, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. Welcome to UNCG Entrepreneur Day 2020 virtual. We are lucky enough to have Miss Anna Sullivan. Before we introduce her, I'll share a little bit about myself, but my name is Justin Strawley. I am Director of Launch UNCG here at UNC Greensboro. You're one place to start something remarkable. We do a number of wonderful initiatives across UNCG's campus and beyond. One of those, which is UNCG Entrepreneur Day. This is actually our 10th annual Entrepreneur Day and our first one online. So we're excited that you all were able to make it, as well as our speakers for tweaking this format a little bit. And it's actually worked out pretty well when you hear where Anna's located right now, to have some of our very, very successful and exciting alumni join us. So today's speaker is Miss Anna Sullivan. She is a Bryan School graduate, class of 2014. She founded her company, The Creative Exchange, shortly after she graduated, and she started that company in 2015. Since then, she has grown her business organically. The Creative Exchange works with CPGs and develops their visual content and social media marketing on the paid and organic side. So Anna, do you mind if I put a link to your website in the chat, and maybe a link to your LinkedIn page as well? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
All right, I'm gonna post that over in the chat just in case you want to see more about Anna, and she's gonna tell you all about herself as well as her company. So Anna, with that said, I'll pass it over to you. Maybe share a little bit more about yourself and share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Very excited about everything you just mentioned that y'all have going on now, which we had a lot of cool programs when I was there, but it seems like it continues to evolve. But my name is Anna, and I graduated from the Bryan School in the Cars department, which is the Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies department, and was always very set on fashion and wanting to live in that world. And when I found out that being a shopping professionally basically as a retail buyer was something you could do and get paid for, I went to school for that. And then I think I had some type of like awakening in a class junior year where we had a speaker come in and she talked about like your own personal brand and owning your website and putting content out there and really putting your name out there. And that really sparked me to start a blog, get really involved in like just putting my name out there, creating content. And then I think that's probably when I got connected with you, Justin, and was doing I can't even remember the name of that store on campus like years ago,
Yeah,
where
the
people can
Spartan
make stuff and sell it.
Trader.
Yeah. Yeah. So got super involved in the entrepreneurial world, and super involved just in Greensboro in general. So that's kind of the kickoff, but let me share my screen. I made a presentation so I could just have some talking points to walk through. I'll just keep it in this format because sometimes when I share the whole screen, it won't show. But that was kind of like the beginning of everything in terms of college. After I finally started my business, I was talking to my mom and she said, we knew you were always going to be an entrepreneur because I had so many businesses growing up, the lemonade stands, just making stuff and selling it, which I also did in college. Anything to really like kind of be in control of my own money that came in and be in control of like what I'm doing and things like that. So that's always been something that's kind of been instilled in me. And then I think it really was in college at UNCG that I had that push around junior, senior year, was working at a local boutique on Tate Street called Sisters, which is actually still there. And I actually went into becoming a buyer. So I was already doing the job that I wanted to do in college. And then, people were like going to school to graduate and do that. And even though it was a small boutique and not like as professional as people do that for like Macy's and things like that, it was still very much like, okay, I'm getting a taste of what all this looks like. And then during that time I met so many cool people from UNCG, from working at Sisters, and we always were talking about starting our own businesses, running our blogs, like owning retail stores, all this stuff. So that was still the continued conversation of like, we know we're like, me and my friends wanted to own businesses, we just didn't know what that looks like. And funny enough, I think like that I was able to have that taste of retail buying in college. And I was like, I don't know if I need to, do this after this. Like, it's not as crazy fun as you would imagine. Um, I This was like when Facebook had been around, but Instagram had like just come out, and I think like Target and Walmart and big people like that were on it, but small businesses weren't. So at that boutique, especially if you've ever worked at a small business or a startup, you will have your hand in everything. Like you'll be asked to do, cleaning the bathrooms to the buying and going on trips to New York and things like that. And they wanted someone to start the social media channel. So I'm very much like a volunteer person. Like I want to try and do everything. And I thought it was a really interesting opportunity to learn a new skill for a business while getting paid for it, because that doesn't happen that often. You usually have to learn something and then you get paid to do it. So I took them up on that opportunity and really fell in love with social media. I love that, like how it can connect people from all over the world. You can put your story out there for free, essentially, other than the time you put into creating your content. And that was around, I think it was around 2012. So I really got like ingrained in that community. I started teaching social media and personal branding classes to other UNCG students. I really like absorbed it, but I think that's really a part of my personality too, of if you've ever taken the Enneagram test, I'm an 8, which is a challenger. So it very much all speaks to all of this of like challenging myself, challenging other people to do different things and really put themselves out there. And I'm definitely like one of those fake it till you make it type persons. I was teaching all this stuff to other students when I was learning it at the same time. But I think like I like to be pressured in that way to really go out there and just like do something and figure it out along the way. And then I think like one of the biggest things that really stood out to me as well that I'm happy that I did was getting involved with the different things Justin was doing at UNCG, I was volunteering for everything. Like anything there was an opportunity for, I was volunteering. I met so many other professionals in the Greensboro area because I really loved everything I was doing on campus, but I think it was that I was getting off of campus and doing things in the actual community that really put my name out there, which that led to any job I wanted, honestly, because no one in Greensboro was doing social media. It was still very new, and I'm putting myself out there telling people that, hey, I do social media, and not like plugging myself, but because I'm here in these like volunteer opportunities, it just worked out because people ask, like, what do you do? What are you in school for? Blah, blah, blah. And I tell them, and I'm, I stand out because I'm the only one there that's doing that. So I think that was really lucky for me that I just, go getter, went and did that, and it worked out. So after college, well, in college, I ended up freelancing. I was still working at the boutique doing their social. I took a few other jobs. And then right after college, one of my friends from school got a job at a local startup. And then they asked me she got me an interview there, which I like literally, she called me one day. She was like, we need a marketing director. Like, can you come in for an interview? I was like, what company is this? It ended up like handling full marketing for a startup. And then that led me to working at I don't know what it's called now, actually, the Triad launch lab or something. I did something downtown, and there was another thing with another entrepreneur that he had an accelerator that was like through Elon. So I got involved in literally everything. And with all of this and all the volunteering and doing all the freelance and working at these accelerators, I finally was like, okay, I think it's time to start something. And I think in college, I kind of figured out like social media was that thing, but I didn't know exactly what that would look like. And at this point, I had never had any agency experience. So I got very lucky and got another call from another UNCG friend of her sister works at an agency and was hiring and for social media, and they needed someone to start the team. So again, I didn't even apply for any of these jobs because I didn't want a job. I wanted to do my own thing, but got very lucky with the connections that I've made and people that I've met and doing social media, that all this stuff kind of just like happened. But again, I put in all the work and all the volunteer time and everything. So I think it did pay off, and it wasn't all luck. But essentially, I got called in for this agency job. And this is literally at the moment I got this job, I was starting to work on my agency. But I was like, this is a great opportunity because I'm not one that really wants to go out and get funding. I wanted to self-fund this. I don't want to feel like I owe anybody money or have to do it their way because, again, if you've taken the Enneagram, I'm very much an 8 of not wanting to go by other people's rules and do my own thing. So with that, I took the job while I was starting my agency, and I learned everything. Like, because I went to school for fashion and I didn't take as many of those marketing classes, I learned everything on the job. I would be sitting in meetings not knowing what certain terms meant, and would go back to my desk and have to Google it, like KPIs and ROI and all that stuff. So I think I feel very good about like getting that start while I was starting my agency and learning things along the way. And until I made enough money for me to live off of my agency, I then quit my job. So I've had my company now for 5 years. And the first year and a half of that, I was working at the agency called Pace Communications. It's based in Greensboro, and they have like a New York office, a Bentonville office, I think LA, several other small offices across the states. But before that, I didn't mention this, I did work at another small agency in High Point with High Point Market and got very ingrained in that world as well. So kind of getting into the idea, it's funny. First of all, I still hate the name of that agency. I actually named it in college. I remember sitting with a friend that I was working with at Sisters, and we both were coming up with business names. And I was like, my company is going to be called the Creative Exchange. Don't know what that is yet or what that looks like, but this is what it's going to be. And that was probably named in like 2013. And here we are, 2020, still with that name. So it kind of stuck around. So concepting the idea, I think like after falling in love with social media and doing so much freelance work, the agency world just made sense. For me, I personally get really bored sitting and working at the same place because after a year goes by, there's only so many cycles that can happen. Like a year, you get through everything. And then when it's the next year, it's the same thing over and over again. It could change slightly, but like that's why people work at the same place so long, because they get very comfortable. The same things can happen. They can kind of tweak it over the years and continue to get better. But like, I like the excitement of working with a lot of new brands and new people and things like that. So I think the agency world kind of spoke to that. And again, it helped tremendously that I went and got that job at the agency called Pace that I worked with for the first year and a half of starting my company. So that kind of built that. And I think like being in Greensboro and really focused on the businesses there, I was doing a lot of freelance and working with small and local businesses, which like, social was very new. It wasn't something people were used to paying for. And I just was like, okay, I'm in love with like helping small businesses, helping them like tell their story through this, new medium. And because like I was very new to it, they were very new. I was charging nothing to do it, especially because I had a full-time job that paid all my bills. So that's kind of how we got our start of like, I really wanted to focus on working with these small local businesses to help them out and help them, continue to get more sales. And I think like after working at that agency, I learned a lot of like what I did and didn't like from the agency world. There was so much of, because when I worked at Pace, I was the first or second hire for the social team. And there was like four of us. There was a director and then like two or three of us that worked on the account or for everything for social within the whole agency. And I was working with people on other teams that had no idea what Twitter was. And they're the ones in charge of writing tweets. And it would be so much back and forth of like, it was really frustrating of them not understanding, me having to revise it. And I'm like, why am I just not doing your job type of thing? And then just the process of like how many people things have to go through, how high the fees are, which now that makes a lot more sense to me of how and why they did it like that. But at the time I was just like, why does this have to go through 10 people when 2 people are doing the work and the other 8 people don't know, how this even works or what it is. They're just checking for spelling and things like that. So I think like all that learning and the roots that I had in small businesses really led to, what I want my company to be. So started the company in 2015. And what it is today is we're kind of our 3 entities now, which 2 of these are very new. The last 2, Social Media Toolkit and No Revisions. No Revisions is new as of last week, which I'm very excited to talk about today. But so I started Creative Exchange in 2015, and kind of our pitch is we are a social media agency and content studio that works with CPG brands. And if you're not sure what CPG means, it's consumer packaged goods. So anything you see on the shelf at Target, CVS, anything like that. We work with a lot of food and beverage brands and, beauty brands, wellness, things kind of along that nature. When I first started this company, I was actually living in Raleigh, and then I was commuting to Pace in Greensboro once a week. So made them very aware that I was not someone to sit in the office all the time. So I worked that into my contract early on of like, hey, I just moved to Raleigh. I don't want to be in the office. I don't work well there. So we worked something out for me to only be in the office 1 or 2 days a week, and then, on client meetings and stuff as needed. So if you know that this is your calling, like definitely work those things into your contract. But now with COVID and everything, I think everyone's working remotely, which is very fun. And I think Justin kind of said this earlier when we were talking about it, but I'm in Mexico right now. So I took this the next month to just live in Tulum to, because we can. So with the Creative Exchange, it just started as me. And then as we got clients, again, I was based in Raleigh at the time, was, the freelance clients I still had, we kind of pulled those under the Creative Exchange as clients. And then I just kept networking and building clients. And we still are like, we were huge on referral based in the beginning, and we still very are on that. But what's exciting now is 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, I relocated to New York. So I moved the whole company there because in North Carolina, like there was a lot of opportunities to do social, but I didn't feel like, the prices I wanted to set were being met. And I feel like the companies I wanted to work with were just not there. So I did try, and I grew up in North Carolina, so I love it, but I did try to do that and moved to New York for a 3-month trial to see like what kind of clients can we get here. And I think that was definitely the best move that I've made. I love New York, and we were really able to focus on working with like brands that I really cared about and wanted to work with, which happened. Brooklyn is huge in food and beverage. So that's kind of like what led us to work with a large amount of our clients are in the food and beverage industries. So being able to connect with people there has been really well for us. So we do work with mainly CPG brands, and now within this 5 years, it went from just me to now I have 9 people on staff, and I think we have 4 interns right now. So this is something I've always wanted, was working for the last 5 years, and it's finally happening, which is exciting. Again, with our personality, I'm never going to be happy exactly where I'm at, but it's something that's always growing. So before I get to the next slide, just to touch on these other 2 here. So with the Creative Exchange, we mainly work on retainer with clients to handle their content creation and to handle retainers working on all their social, whether that's on the organic or paid side. And then we launched a website called Social Media Toolkit a couple of years ago, but we just actually relaunched that with kind of a new design, and it still needs a lot more work. But Social Media Toolkit is basically a resource site. And when I was working at Pace, like one of the biggest things I spent a lot of my time on was doing demos for all these social media tools. There's a billion out there. There's so many tools that people don't even know about that can help you. So we made this resource site of basically just listing, hey, these are all the tools and resources out there for you as a social media manager. Like, use this and search for what you need. And we have other resources on there. And then no revisions. I'll just talk about that later, but that's a new kind of like side agency that I just started this year due to COVID. So very excited to talk a little bit more about that later. So to kind of back up, I know I spoke a lot on this already, but how did I get here? So as I mentioned, like taking that initiative, like really going out there, getting involved in everything I could in school, getting involved in the community and with the agency world. And I talked to so many other agency owners, it really is a referral based business. We actually get a lot of hits from SEO now, which is great. And honestly, as soon as I moved to Brooklyn and had Brooklyn social media on the website, we got more hits than I've ever seen. And I'm like, I should just put this when I was in North Carolina. But that's been amazing. But I think like it really takes that initiative to put yourself out there and just get involved. And I honestly was not that person to in college like take a internship that wasn't paid. I needed to pay my bills. I knew that like I could get paid for what I was doing, so why would I not get paid? But I was still doing like a lot of volunteering and other things that I guess were kind of like unpaid opportunities that did put myself out there. So I highly suggest that. With COVID now, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think like, as I mentioned earlier, with kind of the fake it till you make it mentality, there's so much you can do and so many companies you can help or work with and just like, help them with content creation and social media and things like that, that they'd be happy to have you. And I think like doing things like that goes a long way. The second one is never giving up. So I remember a mentor in college, Sam Funches. I don't know if I said his last name right. And I forgot the place that he like owns or runs in Greensboro.
The NISPOM Center.
Yes, yeah. So I remember a group of us went and were talking to him, and he was like, my number one tip for entrepreneurs is like, don't do it. Like, don't become an entrepreneur. And I knew that like, and that was like the same thing that happened on the first day of college. It was like, my professor was like, look to your left, look to your right. One of y'all is not going to be here at the end of this, which was so true because I remember exactly who I was sitting with. And I remember 2 girls didn't make it, like, which is wild, but it's so true. And again, my personality is being too stubborn to listen to anything like that and keep going. But I think like, if you know you're meant for this, like just never giving up, like it's always going to be okay, because especially with starting the company, there's been a billion mistakes that I have made. One huge one was having a co-founder that did not work out and getting into like legal battles and things like that. But I think like, and there was times when, we weren't making any money, we lost clients, and I was hardly able to afford my rent. Like just times that, I'm crying because I'm not sure if this is going to work, but like I have no other options. Like, yes, I do have the option of going and getting a job, or I could go back and live with my parents, but that was not really an option for me. Like that was just not something I feel that I could do. And I knew I had to do my own thing, but just never giving up on that and knowing that it's going to be okay. And I think like with that is surrounding yourself with other people in the same boat. Because if you talk to any other entrepreneurs, like they have been through it. Like that's your network. That's the people you need to be talking to and getting resources from and having mentors and things like that, because it can be a hard and very lonely life. if you don't have that network. So working my ass off, as I kind of mentioned, like you have to, unless you go and get a whole bunch of funding, or you're just like a genius, or you have a whole bunch of people on your team from the get-go, like maybe you don't have to do that as much. But there was, and honestly, doing this for 5 years, the first year and a half, like I was working a lot, I wasn't sleeping too much, but I had a full-time job and trying to run this, but I still was young, like trying to have like, somewhat of a social life. It was fine. And then it was when I quit my job that like I was not sleeping, I was not eating right. Like it was just like I feel like I needed to work all the time to get to where I'm trying to go. And honestly, I feel like I kind of got a little settled into that. And then when I moved to New York, I knew that like, okay, we have to start over. Like I have to work just as hard. Like this is the beginning because I'm in a whole new, setting. Like it literally felt like I was starting over, but I still had the clients in North Carolina, but taking on a whole new market, like was a whole different world. So really working hard to connect with people and network. And honestly, I had some employees in North Carolina. I think we had like 3 on our team, but so now in the last 2.5 years in New York, it's grown to like, the 9 people that we have today. So can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry, it broke up for a second.
I think it just like, yeah, it like totally just disappeared for a minute. Let me share my screen again. Sorry, it might be the
Yeah, no
here.
worries, no worries.
All right, so I think we're back. So just working like super hard, and I wasn't sleeping or doing any. Sorry, I think it's like breaking up.
Yeah, I think you're good. When it comes back, you can just pick up where you left off. Can you hear me, Anna?
Okay, you're kind of like your voice is breaking up, but it's probably totally.
Yeah, you just keep on rolling. It may be my internet too as the host. So yeah, you can just keep rolling.
I'm gonna try this without video and just do audio for now because I think that might help it.
Yeah, sure. That sounds great.
But let me see if I can see where. Just send a chat if there's any issues of where you can't hear me, just so I'm aware.
Sure.
So it literally just got to a point of like me actually like, taking my health and things like that seriously, because there was so many times where I wasn't doing that and I felt like I had to work all the time, and I get like that because I just start projects that are not even needed. I just like keep myself really busy, but that's why I come to places like Tulum to really make sure like, okay, I don't always need to have that New York mentality of work, but I can actually enjoy myself and work a little bit slower and just, live life, especially with COVID this year. I think like that pushed everybody really into wanting to like, figure out what's really important to them. And then the last one is not letting doubt consume me. So, this kind of goes back to the never getting up, but like there was so many times I would like have breakdowns of, this isn't going to work and I need to figure something else out and I'm not smart enough to do this and things like that. But just not letting that like fully take over. Like, yes, you'll definitely have some hard times, but always making sure that, not letting that fully take over if you know that this is what you're meant to do. So the next thing I want to talk about is what has held me back. This is the biggest one for me, and it's still something I'm continuing to work on, but I'm excited about like some changes I made this year, especially due to COVID, but not pricing correctly. As I originally mentioned, I had a full-time job. I was a student. Like there was I was in North Carolina, which like, cost of living is so different than like New York or any of the major cities, or especially with the clients that I'd want to work with of like what they're actually bringing in. So I think like that was huge for me, and still honestly affects us to where, I wasn't exactly sure like what our prices, should be, or what our services are worth, or what like my time and value is. So that's something I'm still continuing to work on, but I think I kind of wish I was like more, what's the word? I just wish I didn't let clients push me around on that, but I like would get nervous of sending them proposals thinking it was too high, and then not really pushing for what I thought we should be making, which still has an effect today. Like, I mean, I make a lot better money than I ever have previously, especially when starting this. But I think like at this point I should be making more, or I should be able to pay my employees more and things like that. But I'm very happy about where we've gotten, but that's always continued to be something that like I work on. And then the other two is working with the wrong people, essentially. So I wrote down working with the wrong clients and working with the wrong team. I think like, especially in the beginning and especially with small companies, it's so important about the people you bring into this. You can do all of the interviews you want, you can talk to people, but it's honestly until you start working with people, you really figure out who they are. So I've done a lot better job of actually like calling people's references and getting to understand who they are before like bringing them in, because with a small team, everybody has a big part in what we're doing. And these are people that I have to work with on a daily basis and trust that they're going to do, the right thing for our company. So that's definitely something where I've not done the best job at. And I'm honestly very happy with the team that I have now. I definitely feel like they're the right people to be working on this, and I feel very comfortable with them and trust them, which is very hard for me because I don't just trust people very easily. And then the other one is just clients. So in the beginning, there was so many people that we took on that, hey, as a paying client, we're going to do this. Like that, I just am trying to get clients to work here. So that was great, but there was so many clients that would belittle us or speak rudely to my employees or not show up for meetings like very consecutively. So it finally became to a point of like, okay, when is the money not worth it? And we'll just figure it out. We need to stop working with this client or talk to them about like, hey, you can't treat us like this type of thing. And that still happens sometimes. We get clients that, we're very excited to work with. We feel like we vetted them. They say they have great communication, and then we start working with them and they don't communicate with us, or they don't email us back for 4 weeks, and then they wonder where something is. I'm like, well, we tried to call you and emailed you like 10 times and we couldn't, finish this project because you didn't give us what we needed. So there's always going to be people like that, unfortunately. And over the years, especially this last year, we've continued to evolve our processes on, okay, how do we like make sure we can vet people really well? We start signing like very short contracts to begin with, so we all don't get ourselves into a mess of like working with the wrong people, and then we sign longer contracts. So that's always something that continues to evolve, and it's hard to know, who's going to be a great client and who's not. But I will say the cheaper clients are usually the ones that don't work out as well, because they already feel like they're paying way too much, and they want a deal and they think they're getting more than they're actually getting. And I do see that more so with the small businesses of where you're working with the owner directly rather than a large company and you're working with like the director of marketing. So that's been something that stood out to me as well. And I'll get into no revisions in a minute, but this new company, no revisions, that I launched last week, I think that's kind of like speaking to that whole world as well. So another thing that I know is important to talk about today is overcoming, every entrepreneur's problem, which is time, or at least that's what it is in my vision. I think, when I started, and still to this day, like it was a lot of like not sleeping or not feeling like I had enough time to get things done. And I mean, that's exactly why you hire people that can help you and do these things for you, or you work with tools that can automate things. But my kind of three tips on how to overcome like not having enough time is, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think in the beginning, I was somebody that never wanted to not get paid for doing work. But you have friends, you have people in your group of connections that can help you and will be happy to help you for free. So asking people for that help. I definitely know that I feel like none of my friends were qualified to help me with things, but there was probably small things they could have definitely helped with that would have been like a big burden taken off of me. Or if you do have a little bit of money, like, somebody will work for a minimum wage or a stipend or something that can go a long way. So just not being afraid to ask for help in that way, or even, working with a mentor and just asking them questions can be huge. I know that I mentioned this one, but using the right tools. So there's so much that I know that I was doing in the beginning that could have easily been automated with a tool. It was just like, I didn't know about it or I didn't want to pay for it type of thing. So really doing your research and knowing like what tools are out there to help you run your business, whether that's, directly related to social in my case or related to accounting or whatever. There's so many different tools, and I use Product Hunt all the time. I love that website. Always finding new resources out there. So that's one I definitely suggest taking a look at. And then just understanding what's important. I think like, depending on your personality type, I think this kind of plays into that, but understanding, do I want to be working on the large scale things? Do I need to be doing the nitty gritty today? Like, is this actually due today, or can that be, can that wait until tomorrow and I focus on something else? So really understanding, what your priorities are and understanding what's important and when things need to be done can be very helpful. So as I mentioned, I started a new company that we literally launched last week called No Revisions. So a direct impact of COVID this year was, first of all, March. Everybody was freaking out and I was feeling good. Like our clients hadn't left. We were, everybody's on social. We need this. It was doing really well. And I think April is when it really hit us. We definitely lost a couple of clients. We had some clients slash their budgets in half. But then we've also gained clients during COVID because people are like reshifting their focus to social and some people are spending more. So it's been a really interesting year, which I think, again, that's been for everyone. But, this No Revisions project really came from COVID, as well as like me and handling pricing, because I'm in charge of proposals and new business. So as I mentioned, wanting to help people and work with small businesses and me getting excited about new companies and things like that, it makes it hard when, people say, we don't have enough money for that. And I'm like, no, we can figure it out. Like, here's a better price or something. But then that doesn't do justice to, my team and what I pay them, or to myself. I'm taking a hit and things like that. And then with COVID this year, with people slashing their budgets. But another thing that I noticed from COVID was the last couple months is, people are moving away from wanting, not everyone is moving away from this, but a bigger ask was like, we just need visual content. We need photos, we need videos, that type of thing. So I was like, okay, let me figure out how I can make something that's monthly and very affordable that works for us and works for you. So I launched this program called Photo Club, which a company can pay. They do it for 6 months minimum, where we just take and deliver them a certain number of photos and videos. And that has blown up. Like we just signed Health Aid Kombucha. We just signed a canned tea company. Like we're signing big names that I don't know how Health Aid found us, but I'm very excited about them because everybody knows Health Aid. So that's just like really put us out there with that. And then, to me, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm trying to continue to grow the Creative Exchange and have higher pricing, I don't need to have this like not lower income, but like lower budgeted service here. And there's so many other services and things I want to do with these small companies, but it just doesn't make sense to have them under one roof, because I want the Creative Exchange to only take like high paying monthly retainers with my senior level team. And then I should have something separate that can be like one-off offers to these smaller companies. So that kind of launched No Revisions, and the URL is norevisions.co. Essentially, one thing that we noticed was with the Creative Exchange, a lot of our time, or things that get like kind of time sucked, is doing revisions on work. So like clients wanting revisions on their content or their graphics and things like that. So one way that we decided that we can help small businesses is having these service-based projects that like is very straightforward with, the delivery time, how much it costs. And the catch is like they get no revisions, like you get what you get type of thing, because that's very different than like the normal agency world. So this is something I've worked on for the last like 6 weeks. Finally launched it either last week or the week before, and it's been great so far. Like I'm actually going to start promoting it and doing ads for it, which with Creative Exchange, again, it's been very like SEO has gotten us a long way in referrals, and I've never really done any paid advertising for this. Again, as I mentioned, like I've grown this very organically, but No Revisions is something I really want to push. And it also creates a really interesting opportunity between my companies of I can have junior level people or even interns work on No Revisions, and when they hit the senior level, they can move over to like the Creative Exchange. So I'm very excited about what that's doing. And also one thing with this year and with what happened with COVID and then the Black Lives Matter movement, every company had to have statements and be very quick around like their responses to different things. And just making sure like we're prioritizing and focusing on and giving opportunities to businesses owned by people of color. So one thing we did with Creative Exchange was launch, I'm still doing this, but 3-hour consults for Black owned businesses. So that's also something we moved under to no revision. So where you can get that, and then we're selling merch and we're doing other consultations, and all the money made from that is going into this fund. So if you're on the site, you can actually check that out under the fund tab. But this is kind of our way to give back of, you're getting this great work by a really great social team for your small business at a rate you can afford, which we're also giving back. And everything I think we're offering here too is very fun. And again, if you're on the site, I think there's like 12 services there. So I've been very excited about this one. I don't think this is my money maker, but I think that this is a good opportunity and thing I can share with people of like, oh, if you can't afford the Creative Exchange, like here's what we have for you. So it personally helps me in a way of not feeling like I need to reduce my rates for the Creative Exchange. Still gives people an opportunity to work with us in different capacities, and then kind of is able to talk more about my team and like the other initiatives that we're offering. So that's really what COVID pushed us to. And the last thing I'll mention is, what's next. So what's next for the Creative Exchange is I want to continue to grow. Obviously, again, this year has been different. Like we had an office and then we didn't resign our lease because COVID and everybody's working remotely. We have a photo studio in Brooklyn that we shoot out of, but I want to get like a bigger one. I want to continue to grow the team and the services and capabilities that we have. So I think it's just growth for us. And one thing I'm really excited about too is when I started this, and which is still, if you're like on any of our websites, they're all Squarespace websites that I did myself, and I'm not a designer. So they're very like DIY, but I think like the next step for us is I'm about to spend a lot of money on redesign. So I think no revisions will stay because I paid someone to do all the branding for that, and then I just threw that one together. But for like the Creative Exchange, one thing I think was missing is, I have this DIY site that maybe that's why people don't want to pay us as much, because they don't like the branding and the pricing we're giving them doesn't exactly match. So that's a huge thing that's next for us, is like rebranding everything, having it professionally done, after 5 years. Because again, I was very focused on building this organically, spending my own money on it, not owing anybody money. And I think it's finally time to like, spend my money where I really need to, and focus on growing the business in that way. So growth and rebrands and making sure that, the work we put out is always quality. The processes we have are, continue to be fine-tuned. And essentially at the end of the day, I just want everyone that works with us to have, a good experience. So that is what I have for you guys.
Anna, thank you so much for sharing your story here. And all of our attendees, if y'all have any questions, please add those to the chat and we'll let Anna answer those. We've got another few minutes here, and Anna, you covered so many great points, and I wanted to revisit some of those to maybe take a deeper dive. And I'll try to start earlier into a student's career. You talked earlier about how important networking was for you. What is networking? People hear about this term networking. You talked about how it led to a variety of opportunities. Share more what networking is and how maybe some strategies that students can use while they're in school to build their network or improve their networking skills.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is the people that know me, that have like grown up with me and things like that, I'm very extrovert, like I'm very loud, I love to talk type of thing. And then when I got to college, people didn't immediately see that, but it's like, these are people I grew up with, so I was very comfortable. But when meeting new people and even networking, that was something that like freaked me out. Like I hate having small talk. I just want to get to the good stuff. Like, how did you do this? And, what is your thoughts on this? I don't want to say, have that initial like 5 minutes of, all right, how can we find, the synergy here type of thing. But essentially what I imagine networking is just going out there and meeting new people that, especially that are relevant to, the people that you need to meet, whether that's going to a conference or going to an event. Like I mentioned, I was doing a lot of volunteering, and there was one I went with you, Justin, that I volunteered at. It was like a gala or something. thing. I don't even remember what it was, but I met so many people that night, and everyone like had really cool jobs and seemed high up, and I'm, you know, a 20-year-old college kid. But just putting yourself out there in different ways, whether it's like something very directly related to your industry or just related to entrepreneurship. Anything you think there's value in going to, I would go, especially if you have the time. I think now with COVID, you know, everything's online. But prior to that, like when I moved to New York, I went to every single event that I could, like anything in the food and beverage industry, anything for entrepreneurs, anything for startups. Like I was trying to find the right things to go to, and then just making sure I'm talking to people. And especially if there's any type of list that you know who's going to be there, the speaker is before, like looking into that and like trying to figure out, you know, what am I going to say to them? Because essentially, I feel like everyone wants to talk to the people speaking when they go to these events. But just really understanding, you know, like, what are you looking to get out of this, and how can you make that connection, and offer value to that person, because essentially you're looking to get value from them. So I think that's kind of the key. And now that like I've been doing this for so long, there's definitely been too many events that I've gone to that didn't feel like they were worth it. Whether, you know, like it wasn't what I imagined it was going to be, or there wasn't actually time to like network with people. And again, like just even having small talk with people gives me anxiety, because I'm like, I don't know you, I don't know what we have in common, like that type of thing. But I think that was something I definitely had to push myself into, and it's definitely paid off. And if maybe I didn't have as much anxiety about that, we'd be even bigger to this day. But that's just my personality. And now that I have a team, I kind of push them to do the same thing, and like network with their, you know, network with their communities and get people to come to our company because of it. So that's been amazing as well, of like not just networking for a company, but like now I have a team of 9 that can do the same thing.
Nice. And kind of in that same vein of networking is you really come off well if you have some confidence. And you mentioned earlier kind of faking it till you make it. And you mentioned earlier about being I am a 20-year-old, I'm in here with these executives. How can I, you know, impress them? Can you talk more about this idea of sort of faking it till you make it? Maybe it's not being inauthentic, but share more about that and how maybe students could take advantage of that fake it till you make it approach.
Yeah, you cut out a bit, but I think I know what you said. So essentially, I, again, like I have a hard time like having small talk, but I love talking to people and learning things, and actually have a podcast now where I just, that's a great way for me to meet and talk to people actually, which is kind of my new version of networking. I've just been emailing agencies and brands that I love and saying, hey, like I'd love to have you on the podcast. And that really opens up a conversation for me to ask anything I want, be connected to them for a reason that doesn't seem like I'm trying to sell them something or, you know, trying to collaborate with them. But also offers value to them because I'm putting their name out there through the podcast that, you know, I'm trying to promote. So I didn't mention that, but that's actually like a very interesting thing of today that you can do, because I started the podcast in COVID, and everybody was essentially free. No one had anywhere they needed to be. So everyone said yes. And I actually just interviewed this woman this week that owns this really big agency. I didn't even know she was an influencer on Instagram until like after the fact. But it just felt really cool talking to her. But that might be the networking of today is start your own podcast. But essentially the fake it till you make it situation, I think like I was never someone that liked school. Like I liked all the social events and the clubs that school, you know, gave me, but doing homework and things was just not for me. And even though I love to learn and love to figure out how things work, like I won't push myself to do it unless there's something like there's like stakes on the line. So I would like teach classes at UNCG to this club I was in called Threads about like graphic design and branding and social media and things like that. But like it took me to be pushed to put myself in front of an audience to really know what I was doing, because I was like, I'm not going to embarrass myself and not know what I'm talking about. But if it's just me trying to learn something on my own, then like it just doesn't work out for me. So I think like that was a big push for fake it till you make it. And essentially with social, like there's still so many people that don't even know what it is or how it works. And if you can seem confident and you know that you can trust yourself to learn it along the way, then, you know, go for it. I think like now how well I understand it compared to when I did, you know, years ago is I know when people are kind of like bluffing when they talk about things. I'm like, you're just talking around the subject. So I don't know how much you can do that in this world now, depending on who you're talking to. But I think like it is about having that confidence and, you know, getting people to trust you know what you're talking about and trust that you're going to figure it out. And there's been times where like I've I've definitely failed and not given something that somebody thought they were getting, and that sucked. But I think that's going to come along with everybody's journey, honestly.
Excellent. You talked earlier about this inflection point of I'm working full time at this agency, but I know I want to start my own company and I've started it myself. Can you talk more about how you reached that decision of, okay, I'm ready to leave my full time job and do my company full time? Can you talk about that decision and sort of what led to you making it?
Yeah. At first, like I never wanted to even take a job, but it was so funny because I didn't even want to interview, but like they begged me to go in and interview, or my friend did, because her sister was desperate to hire someone, and there wasn't anyone in Greensboro doing this. So I went in, actually really liked everyone there, and because I was able to work out that like I only go to the office certain days, it didn't feel as much like I was, doing the corporate thing, because I just knew that was never me. Um, and I worked at VF for a little bit. If anybody knows VF in Greensboro, like very corporate life, not for me. So I think that you know, it was so helpful to have that job and learn and continue to grow. One thing I will say that I feel like, I've been doing this for 5 years, but I don't even know if the first year and a half count because I was so ingrained in that job. And, I thought that like I could dedicate 40 hours to that job and 40 hours to creative exchange, but that wasn't the case. Like I was working way more once I quit that job, and I do feel like a little behind, but otherwise I wouldn't have learned that stuff. So it obviously worked out. But I literally started the company as I started that job. And, I always knew it was something like, okay, I'm going to get to a point of where I've learned enough and where I'm making enough money. So that was like my two things I was waiting on. And when I say enough money, I just meant enough money to pay my bills, not to where, because like when I had both jobs, I was making good money. I was buying anything I wanted, like, because I had two full-time jobs essentially. And like creative exchange was all just extra money, and I was so young, I'm not thinking about saving and what I should actually be doing with this. But I think that was kind of my two things I was waiting for. And I worked at Pace for a year and a half, so I'd got the cycle of a year, worked a little bit over that, so really like got that second half a year cycle. And I finally realized, okay, like we're making a stable amount of money, a little bit more than I need to make to pay my bills. And it was also, I didn't know exactly when I was going to do it. Like I was like, okay, this is going to happen within the next couple months type of thing. But there was one day I got called into the office, and my boss basically said like she thinks I'm checked out, and she apologized for me being checked out, which was so funny because I was thinking like, oh, she can tell I'm checked out. Like I didn't, I thought I was like I had my poker face on. But she she said that, and then she apologized because, which it all made sense at the end, because I got hired as a strategist, and then I started doing like community management, which is completely different. Community management is not very fun either. So that was kind of like a flip. So she apologized for like my job switching, and I was like, I didn't even think that about that. And then she asked me if I wanted to move to like a different team within the company because they wanted to keep me. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm sorry, I am very checked out. And as you know, I have like my own company, and I think this is like the time I should leave. And I quit on the spot. Like, I mean, I gave them a notice, and then I actually stayed longer to train the new person and to help them get through that transition. But it wasn't, I did not plan to quit that day, but it just like that conversation was happening. I was like, oh, this is the moment. Like I knew that was the right time to do it.
Got it. And one other thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to revisit was your story about partnerships. They're very important. A lot of the students and other entrepreneurs I work with want to find a partner. They have a partner they're starting a business with, and a lot of times it doesn't work out, and you're tied to that person through that business. What are some
Yeah.
tips that you have for folks that want to make sure that they're finding the right partner for their business?
Yeah, well, I can definitely say I did it the complete wrong way. So essentially, I'll tell you a little bit of backstory. I know we only have a couple more minutes left, but I met this guy at an entrepreneurship event in Raleigh, and we connected. He wanted to learn about social media, so I met up with him and was like teaching him some stuff for his company. And I kind of taught him everything I knew. Like I'm very open person of like I'm happy to help people, obviously if I have the time type of thing. So then essentially his startup failed and mine didn't. So I was like, well, do you want to work for me type of thing? And then like I fell in love with him, which was not a good thing to do. And then gave him part of my company because again, I wanted to work with him every single day. And then essentially we didn't work out. And then that led him to like being really salty about like the business and things like that. So essentially that's what happened with my situation. So I definitely say don't be in love with this person. And you know, I taught him everything he knew. So it wasn't that he was providing me any value. He was just like kind of helping with things I taught him how to do. So I would honestly suggest that, you know, I would suggest that you're finding someone that can balance you out, like somebody that doesn't do what you do, because if y'all do the same things, I think there can be some tension there. And I know some companies that the two people do the exact same thing and it works out really well. But I think the best value of having a partner is you're focused on creative and somebody's focused on new business or something. Like you definitely have two different sides that you can balance each other out, because again, I taught him everything he knew about social and he did have other skills that were beneficial. But if I gave him a certain percentage of my company, like he needs to bring a lot more to the plate than just what I've taught him. Plus, you know, he for example, he went to school for engineering, which, you know, is great and he's really smart, but that didn't have anything to do with social and creative content and working with small brands. So I think, yeah, like the complementary strengths is huge, and that would be my number one tip. And just being very upfront about like what percentage people are getting or what like people's involvement is, and what that looks like, because we didn't do that at the beginning. And at the beginning we didn't know that that's even what we were going to do, was give him a certain percentage, but it kind of like, you know, went to that. So I think like making all that straight from the get-go, and again making sure that like it's all about the complementary strengths, because I think even we would have clients and he's like, why do clients only want to speak to you? And I'm like, well, you don't have the best personality for client facing things, and also you don't seem as confident and when you're talking to them about like their services and what they're paying for. And for example, like which it looks like Becky commented this, that my energy is infectious, which thank you. I got that same compliment from a client that we just signed yesterday. They're like, we chose to go with you guys because Anna, your energy is just so there and you're so excited about this. And I love what I do, so it's easy. But I think if people don't love that, then, you know, they don't need to be client facing, first of all, or they might just not need to be involved, because if this is just something for the money for them, or they think it's a good opportunity, but like they're not in love with it and actually passionate about it and want to learn about this like continually, because like, for example, social media is always evolving, then that's just not the person you need to be doing this with.
Great advice, Anna. And we just have a couple more minutes, but I did get one last question here through the chats. You mentioned that you moved from Raleigh to Brooklyn to find more of those consumer packaged goods clients. Can you talk more about how you investigated a good market to move into, and maybe some tips for folks for when they're making that same consideration?
Yeah, so one thing about North Carolina is it's an amazing state. You have every option you want, from like beach to mountains. There's some creative people. There's like Raleigh, for example, is huge on like, you know, health and tech and things like that, which wasn't my field. So when I got to Raleigh, I think like that really screamed in my face. I was like, oh, this is huge on the tech scene, and that's just not who I am. But there was always this thing about like, oh, let's keep creatives in North Carolina. So then I moved to Durham because everybody was like, that's where creatives are going, Durham. So I tried that out. And essentially I still just didn't feel like I was with my people. Like Durham just felt like everybody was a Duke student there, I swear. Like I didn't meet anyone else. And when I realized that, like, I just don't think North Carolina has the clients that I'm looking for, or like if the clients are here, then other agencies kind of already have their hand with them, because New York isn't as much about loyalty. Like North Carolina is very loyal. Like you work with someone, you work with them for 20 years. New York isn't as much like that. And I feel like I was, you know, starting at a point where everybody already had their clients in North Carolina and I didn't have any opportunity. So I started going to DC a lot. DC had a food and beverage incubator called Union Kitchen, which we still work with today. So I was starting to drive to DC like once a month. Like I would go, I have a lot of friends there now, and the creative community got really involved in that that incubator there. And I was like set on moving to DC. Well, New York was always a dream. I honestly wanted to go to college in New York, but I couldn't afford it. But I think after I found out rent in DC was the same as New York, I was like, wait, why don't I just try New York out? So I essentially lived at a co-living space. I signed up for 3 months. I was like, I'm going to give myself 3 months to network, see if I can build business here. And if I don't, then I'm coming back to North Carolina. In my mind, I knew I didn't want to go back, but I was like, if I can't afford it, I can't afford it. Like, I just have to do something else. So I lived there for 3 months. After the first month, I signed so many new clients. It was insane how much growth can happen in a month from hard work, really, and just being in the right place. So that is what worked out. And now I've been there for 2.5 years. So.
Anna, we are at the end of our time. You have provided, this has been great. You've answered so many great questions. You've given some amazing advice here, and we can't thank you enough for joining us today. If everybody, attendees, if y'all want to scroll up in the chat, I posted a link to Anna's website, thecreativeexchange.co, as well as to her LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with her. Again, as a reminder, we'll be posting this recorded webinar online. We'll send you an email about it. But Anna, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry about the connection. There is a hurricane in Tulum right now, but I can send you my contact. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
All right, Anna, thank you so much. Everyone take care, and we hope to see you at some other sessions today for the 2020 Virtual Entrepreneur Day.